Welcome to another episode of the Manufacturing Executive Podcast. This show is being brought to you by our sponsor, Cadenas Part Solutions. I'm Joe Sullivan, your host and a co-founder of the industrial marketing agency Gorilla 76. So anyone who's listened to this show before knows that I'm a marketing and sales guy, and I co-lead an agency that helps manufacturers do those things more effectively. So naturally, a number of our episodes on the podcast have had kind of a marketing or sales spin to them. But today, we're going to talk to somebody on the other side of the coin, and that's procurement. Aaron Breimer is a supply chain leader with an extensive background in contracting, negotiation, logistics, purchasing, and inventory management. Aaron handles international and domestic sourcing, along with delivering cost savings across a wide category of products. Aaron is also the recent founder and host of the Manufacturing Procurement Guy podcast, where he highlights manufacturing leaders so they can discuss their successes in the marketplace. His most important job is being a proud husband of 13 years and a father of 2 beautiful girls. Aaron, welcome to the show.
Joe, thanks for having me. Really appreciate the time and honor to be on your show.
Yeah, you bet. And it's been exciting watching you get your show off the ground in recent months. I wrote a LinkedIn post not too long ago, as you know, and even highlighted in our newsletter to 4,000 some manufacturing people that your story, because it was inspirational. You reached out to me a while back about, sort of how to build a brand at a personal level. And I talked about this idea of launching a podcast, and then all of a sudden, like a week later, you've got a podcast. It was just awesome the way you just jumped on it and you said, I'm doing it, and you dove right in. So love the initiative.
Yeah. And I appreciate your feedback too, Joe. It's and you're right. You and I had a conversation and you gave me great advice and feedback, and have known you for a while and respected you and Franco and personally and professionally, and just you guys do a great job, and I appreciate everything you've done.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that comment. So, well, Aaron, we have talked a lot on this show about sales and marketing over the first 25 episodes or so. But every one of my clients and the listeners to this show too, as manufacturing folks, somewhere during the sales process, they're going to run into their customer's version of you. As a procurement guy or buyer. And so I love bringing your perspective to the table here as somebody in procurement. I think getting right into it here, a topic that I know is particularly relevant right now as we finally get ready to put this ugly year of 2020 in the rearview mirror. For anybody listening into the future here, we're recording this in kind of early mid-December of 2020. But a particularly relevant topic right now is risk mitigation in the supply chain, or having second sources when disruption occurs, whether it's some kind of crazy disruption like we've experienced, something like we've never seen before with COVID, but also other forms of supply chain disruption that everybody experiences along the way and is going to continue to experience somewhere along the way. So can you kind of speak to this topic a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I think one thing to point out early on is that it's not even when a disruption is going to happen, it's going to be when it happens. And I think one thing that being in the field now for about a decade, just like you said earlier, Joe, it's second sourcing. That's been a big focus in my career, is making for sure that we have qualified second sources for our primary products. So whether it's a raw material or whether it's a production supplies or whatever that looks like in your field, making for sure that you're not only looking at what you're buying, but who you're buying from, and then also making for sure, again, that you've got quality second sources in place, because disruptions will happen. Whether it's a vendor that you work with, that maybe their company goes on strike, which I've seen, and it puts me as the buyer, as the procurement person, in a bind if I don't have somebody qualified that I can reach out to and say, hey, we'd like to kind of move forward with you guys and see if there's an opportunity to procure items from you. So second source is a really big thing. I think also on the risk mitigation is inventory management. Inventory management is making for sure that, as some people in the field say, you've got a buffer of inventory. You've got an inventory level of items that if let's just say you're vendor supplier cannot ship for 8 weeks, or let's just say that there's issues at the port. How do you handle those things? So I've always said I'd always have a little bit more than not enough. So that's the way I've always kind of tried to bridge that gap, because again, I'll continue to say it, but it's not if it happens, it's when it happens, and making for sure that your total supply chain is set up to face these types of issues, similar to what we've been seeing in this very difficult year.
Yeah, great points there. How about negotiation, Aaron? I know this is something when you and I chatted a few weeks ago to kind of think about what would be helpful on this episode. That's a topic you brought up. What is someone like you in a buyer's role looking at when, say, there are 3 bids on the table, and how often is it about more than just price?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll say this: I love negotiation. I love the art of it. I mean, there's so much art and science. I've had the opportunity to go to the Booth School of Business and other programs where I've learned from some of the best and brightest in the field, how to negotiate, how to do it. But to that question, Joe, of looking at 3 bids, the first thing we got to make for sure is that are these apples to apples bids, and whether it's a bid for a piece of iron, or whether it's a bid for a very intricate a design. We have to make for sure that who's ever bidding on it, that we're looking at the same thing, because that's what I've ran in a lot, especially when we get in detailed things like drawings and specific items and things like that. Somebody could bid this, and I could look at it as a procurement person, not privy enough to all the details behind it, and say, well, man, they're 25% less. Why wouldn't we go with them? I talk with an engineer, or I talk with somebody from our operations who knows the application, who's the SME, that says, well, it's because they didn't include this in their bid. So I think looking at that, making for sure it's apples to apples, and then also other things are really big. I think working capital is another big thing, and pay terms. Pay terms is a very, very big component of a lot of bids now. And a lot of companies are looking to obviously push payments out. And so, if somebody comes at me with net 30 terms and the price is 10,000, and then somebody comes at me with net 20 or 120, and their price is 10% more, we've got calculators that'll kind of take those assumptions into effect and say, what's the best thing for your business right now? Is it a business where cash is king and you need that, or is it a business where you don't have much debt? So to you, the pay terms really isn't a big thing. You want to get the lowest price. So there's a lot of factors that go into a negotiation. First, again, making for sure that you're looking at the same thing. Second, looking at all points of the actual bid. So you want to make for sure that the RFP, RFQ is tailored and very specific. So when it's sent out, everybody is looking at the same thing, and that they come back with exactly what you're requesting as the buyer or procurement person.
And you had some really great nuggets in there. The terms point, I think, is really great, because sometimes it might be kind of an apples to apples comparison, and even the price might be similar, but if cash flow is super important right now, that's probably a lever that can be pulled, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. It really is. It's, and again, working with various size of companies and companies that look at things differently as far as, cash flow and, cash cycles. And there's obviously different ways of being paid, whether, there's purchasing cards, there's things called V cards, there's obviously your standard check, but there's a lot of ways you can do that. But pay terms is really one thing that I feel like these last kind of 5 to 7 years has become such a big topic in negotiation, as far as, what are the terms going to be? What are the terms going to be? And quite frankly, it's one of the first questions I'll ask as a procurement person, is that, I want to know your price. I want to know, what does that look like? What's your service? What's my expectations? What's my team's expectations? But also, what's your pay terms? And that's a really big part of it.
Yeah, great insight. Something else you hit on there that comes up a lot in my conversations with, especially sales teams that, we Gorilla 76, our agency, serves mid-sized manufacturers doing marketing and some sales consulting too. And we're always getting into conversations about who the ideal buyer is, not only at a company level, but who the buying process influencers are inside of a company. And it's often there's engineers, might be plant managers, operations folks, C-suite at some point. Procurement is always there. But what's interesting is with most of our clients who sell more complex, customs, big ticket items, they are focused primarily on the people who play a role earlier in the buying process, which tends to be technical people or engineers. And often by the time the conversation with procurement happens, those people, those technical people, have already had their hands on it and their eyes on it, and they are an advocate for a solution to procurement. Ultimately, it's got to run through them. But I'm curious, from your perspective, what role do engineers tend to play in a buying decision? When do you also have to go pull their expertise to help you make a decision?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot there. I would say that one thing I always push for, Joe, is to make for sure that I'm aware of these conversations early on, because you're exactly right. I've seen it where I kind of get pulled in at the very end, and they've already had, say multiple conversations with one company, and they've got two other bids, but really they've met with one company 7 times and already had a layout and already talked design and all that stuff. And then they come to me and say, hey, here's the 2 other bids. Well, it doesn't really, that typically doesn't work really well from a negotiation standpoint. So I try and tell my folks, whether it's engineers or whether it's, the plant operations folks, let me be involved early on. And I never want to be called the bad guy, but the guy that kind of has to go back and say, hey, here's the expectations. Let me kind of lay it out. Let me kind of be that intermediary between you and the company. Now, another point you made, Joe, was that there is definitely certain things that I'm not the SME on. If there's drawings, schematics, if there's things like that, if there's layouts of a plant or layout of a design or a gearbox or some sort of motor that has very intricate a design behind it, certainly I got to get my people involved on that early. But I never like to work in a silo. I always want to make for sure that I'm working with all the players in it. So, because at the end of the day, these are decisions, especially for major buys, there should be numerous parties involved in that from an organization. Procurement, my field, we're one part of it. We're a strategic partner to the engineers and to the plant. It shouldn't be, I'm out on an island, they're on an island, and somebody else is, and then we're not even talking the same language. So, to kind of sum that up, I want to make for sure that I'm in these conversations and that the end user is in these conversations early on, and that we're making these decisions and having these conversations, because it can even come to contracting too. So if it's a situation where, we got to have some a contract behind it, some sort of an agreement, some sort of terms and conditions behind it, I'm going to be heavily involved in that. So I want to make for sure that I'm in these conversations and that I'm representing the company and making for sure we're not only doing what's best, but that, we're getting the right solution for the end user.
Yeah. As a follow-up there, Aaron, I'm curious when the technical professionals, engineers, the ones who are the SMEs, go too far down a path with one particular solution provider, and you get looped in too late. What kind of happens? Do things get derailed? Do they wind up having to backtrack and go talk to other companies then to get competitive bids? I realize it's going to be different from one scenario to the next, but just kind of curious what kind of problems that winds up presenting.
It can present a lot of problems. I mean, especially if we're talking about a large scale project or a large scale buy. I mean, again, I can't state it enough how it's important that the procurement person, your procurement agent, whoever that person is, your procurement director is involved in these conversations, because like you said, and I've seen it more than I would like to admit, where I get pulled in the very end, or even worse, these decisions have been made and we've engaged with these companies, and contracts have been signed without me being a part of it. And then there's ramifications of I like to put deadlines on when the machine is supposed to be here, and if they're not, then there's certain pay clauses or rebate clauses that the vendor would have to adhere to. So, a lot of times that if we have specific dates, let's just say that a plant has a scheduled shutdown, or you have a date where this, piece of equipment has to be here for installation for it to start running on X date. Well, if you kind of work with a vendor and they tell you, handshake and a thumbs up, we're good to go. And then all of a sudden that it doesn't show up on that date, that's when I get pulled in. And they're like, you got to reach out to the vendor, find out what's going on. And I'm like, what vendor are you talking about? So I think it is really important that, I like to be in these conversations early on, not as though I'm acting as the SME, but just so I'm kind of on board to kind of set those expectations with my my colleagues, and then also with the folks who are buying the piece of equipment or service from.
Aaron, you and I were recently talking about the difference between vendors that are proactive versus vendors that are more reactive. And I'm curious, from your perspective, is there a time and place for both types? And when do you prefer one style over the other?
Yeah. Joe, I would say that I'm going to typically prefer my proactive vendors. And it's the vendors that if they see that there's a byproduct that we buy, and there's a byproduct of a part that they make, or a raw material or an ingredient, that they're telling me, hey, we're hearing that this thing may cause a price increase down the road, or we're hearing that the manufacturer of this part is having some issues, or they have a machine down. So we may need to look at procuring this from somewhere. I can't tell you how big that is to me to know that type of information up front. So I would say, as a whole, getting that type of information as early, as soon as possible, means a lot for me as a procurement person, because that means I can at least start to do some backup work initially to make for sure that my team and my folks are ready if something would happen down the line that this vendor kind of let me know about.
That's good stuff. So for anybody listening who is a supplier to somebody else, be an educator, right? Be a voice in your industry. Make sure you know what's going on and share that information.
Yeah, absolutely, Joe. I think, that's put excellent. I mean, it really is. I think it's just, if you know something that could impact someone, i.e. your customer, let them know that up front, especially for the vendors that, and your customers that you have a good rapport and relationship with. I mean, that's big. And that's what, when I think of a proactive vendor, I think of a relational vendor, not just a transactional vendor. I think I think of somebody that's just reactive, just reacting to the industry. Hey, sorry, we can't ship this when we sent a purchase order 2 weeks ago, and now you're just telling me this, and we expect it to be here in 2 days. Like, stuff like that can be very frustrating, and not just to me, but a lot of times the procurement person is the one that is going to have to convey that information to the plant manager or to somebody in operations or engineering. So it's just kind of, again, making for sure that your relationship is good and that you have really good streamlined communication for current issues or anything that could impact them down the road.
Another topic that I wanted to hit on was this idea of when it's time to part ways with a vendor. How do you do it in a way that's, doesn't burn bridges, that's respectful? It could be probably an uncomfortable or even awkward situation sometimes, I suppose, but something that probably is part of your world, right?
It is. And, I've been doing this for a while now, and having those conversations still, most of the time they're not easy. And, but I'm going to revert back to something my grandfather, who's 88 years old, he served in the Korean War, somebody that I love and respect, has told me since I was 10 years old. He said, Aaron, do a job large or small, do it right or not at all. And I love that, and I live by that. And so to answer your question, I love to have these conversations face to face. Now, I realize in 2020, Joe, as you led into that, it's been a difficult year, challenging year, and quite frankly, a pretty horrible year for a lot of people, and whatnot, and for their families and everything. But I always want to have those conversations face to face, and I think it's the professional thing to do. I think it's the right thing to do, and especially if there was a contentious bid, or there was something going on where maybe the relationship kind of soured, or maybe expectations were not met. I think it's critical to have those conversations face to face. I want to be sitting across somebody and tell them, this is why we're moving a different direction, and this is what we're going to do, as opposed to sending an email. That's my preference. That's the way I like to handle things, and that's the way I've handled things in the past.
Yeah, and maybe you and I are old school, but I'm in the same boat. I think humanize yourself. It just brings kind of a level of respect, and you never know when things might come back around. I've been on the receiving end of that, where, somebody parted ways with me and my agency, and geez, I mean, literally I had a call this week with somebody who we did business with a few years back, and we parted ways on good terms, and now the time's right again. And we're kind of back in the conversation with them, and, could have gone in another direction depending on either how they or we had handled the situation. So I think just keeping those relationships strong where you can is important.
Absolutely, Joe. I couldn't agree more. And it's just, what we heard years ago too, don't burn bridges. And because you're exactly right. You never know when a vendor could come back in your life and really potentially help you out, or be a catalyst to maybe the company's made changes, and 3 years down the road, you guys are looking at some different types of automation, and now that company is a partner that you can work with. So I've seen that too, and you're exactly right. And it's just, don't burn bridges. Even with salespeople. I mean, a lot of times, I interact with salespeople all the time, every day, and whatnot. And it's just, I'm with you on the whole old school thing, because it just, I want my vendors to set time slots if we're going to meet. I want my vendors to make for sure they're telling me about this stuff. And with that, that's just not a one-way street. I want to tell them the same thing. If our business is making changes, that the climate is changing and evolving, and there looks to be some sort of change that's going to happen, something like that, I want to make for sure that I'm communicating with them as well. So just having good communication, I think, is really the best practice.
For sure. Well, Aaron, I've kind of covered my questions here for you today. Is there anything you'd like to add that I didn't ask you about, or a way you'd like to wrap this up?
First, let me thank you again, Joe, for having me on. It's I can't say it again. I've known Joe and his business partner, John Franco, for a number of years, and just you guys are top notch, and I mean that, just great guys, and just doing the right thing, and I couldn't recommend a company to work for more than Gorilla 76. So appreciate you and appreciate what you're doing, Joe. So as far as kind of something to end with, as any other topic, I would just say that 2020 has been a challenging year, and I would just tell the folks who are listening to this, be resilient, and things will come back, but make for sure you've got proper things in place for risk mitigation. Make for sure you're having good communication, and if anybody has any questions, if I can be of any support, I'm more than welcome to do that.
Great. Well, I appreciate the kind words. I did not pay Aaron to say those things, but probably should. But great conversation though, Aaron. You brought a ton of great insights here, and I think that our listeners are going to get a lot of value out of this. So appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do this.
Absolutely. You bet, Joe. It's been my pleasure.
Well, last question, Aaron, where can people get in touch with you? And also I want to plug your new podcast. You're just a few episodes in, but you're going down a great path with the manufacturing procurement guy. So can you speak to those two things?
Sure.
Where people can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best way to find me is just on LinkedIn. Seems like LinkedIn is the best business networking site out there, and just for information and networking, and just an opportunity to learn and grow. So that would be the best way to find me on LinkedIn. And you could shoot me an email, or my phone number's on there as well. And yeah, I just started the Manufacturing Procurement Guy podcast. 3 episodes in, thanks to the support of Joe. and some others who've really been a catalyst for that. So there's a podcast, Manufacturing Procurement Guys. So I'm trying to do at least 1 or 2 a month. That's my goal right now, and we'll see where we go from there. But really excited about it, and really would love to help if you have any questions. So thank you.
Great, awesome. Well, go check that out. Aaron's off to a great start. So I would like to say thank you once again to our sponsor, Cadenas Part Solutions, for helping make this episode possible. And Aaron, thanks for taking the time to join.
Thank you, Joe. It's been my pleasure.
As for the rest of you, I hope to catch you on the next episode of The Manufacturing Executive.